Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. Thank you so much for joining us. However you may be joining us, we appreciate it. I'm your host, Keith Weisheit, LCSW. I am joined by Lisa Schilling, LCSW, with South Central Louisiana Human Services Authority, Executive Director. Lisa, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And you know, it's one of those things where we spend a great deal of time talking about and thinking about what's happening in our community, some of the issues that are there. Of recent, there's been just a few issues that we've identified that just we need to kind of talk about and see the best way to handle. And I'm so very glad that you've come on to be able to do that with us today.
Thank you so much. You're right. I mean, there are a lot of things going on in our communities. People are dealing with a lot. Not only we had the COVID pandemic still going on, we had the hurricane now that's happened. We have a lot of people that are struggling mentally, physically, and so I feel like it's important for us to talk about how they can handle situations that might arise when people are acting out and not get into a situation where someone might be injured. It's really important to know the steps to take.
Right, and sometimes what constitutes an emergent situation, and what do we do about that? And so I'm so very glad that you've put together a training, if you will, for us to kind of go through over these next 3 segments or so to be able to talk about. And so let's bring up that first one, if you don't mind, that first slide, and we can really kind of address the issue.
Sure. So, you know, it is about how we are dealing with law enforcement in the community and how we should really be looking to ways to partner with them so that we're, you know, having the same conversation and sharing the information that we should. So it's commonly known that the police are the first responders to 911 calls made about urgent mental health situations, but it's really little known about what is appropriate to call for 911 because people think call 911 for everything.
Right.
So police respond to mental health crisis when there's a family member or a friend that calls 911. Officers encounter a person in an urgent mental health situation while on patrol, so they could be on the street, they could be acting out in a business. Or an individual that's unknown to the person with mental health illness calls 911 because of unusual threatening behavior, and we've seen that before in our settings, but I don't know that everyone has been privy to see that.
Right, and so it's a little different. So they just need to know kind of what to do, and a lot of times we need to make sure we're aware of what to do because the situation can get kind of difficult.
It can, and sometimes those situations can end poorly.
Right.
If we're not communicating with law enforcement or communicating with the dispatcher when we make those calls so that they understand what they're going into. And they need to know that.
Right. And so staying calm enough to be able to share that information is really important. And so I like the fact that you've kind of broken this down about what people need to do or when they need to call or who they call.
Or who to call. That's the big thing. So I think the next one talks a little bit about what do I call?
Right.
Or who do I call if someone is having a mental breakdown? So it's important. You can call 911.
Yes.
The crisis is life-threatening. You know, just make sure to notify the operator that it's a psychiatric emergency and ask for, if there's one available, an officer that has been trained in crisis intervention. It's really important.
Right.
That there is someone that can respond and knows how to deal with those people, and we can talk about that a little bit later.
Right.
So and give them a lot of information.
Right, so that psychiatric emergency is a little different from other types of emergencies, and that's if, for example, if we have someone that's got a history of schizophrenia, if we have someone that's got a history of bipolar disorder with psychotic features, it's important to be able to share that information.
Most definitely.
Right.
Then talks a little bit about what are the reasons I should call 911. Well, of course, if you have any type of major health emergency, but for emergency or crisis situation with a psychiatric situation, so mental health, you know, it's most important that you call them. So things that you can look for in that type of situation. So is it an emergent or it's a crisis? So we can look at that next slide, if you will, too, Jason. So this is a lot of information, I know, but I want people to understand why you should be calling them and what you should be saying. So an individual that could harm themselves or other, an individual that is likely to do that, because there's a little bit of a difference. Right. You know, talking about that. If they've caused serious property damage already, so they become violent, maybe they're non-compliant, they're on medication, something has really triggered them. An individual is unable to care for themselves, gravely disabled, so they can't make decisions. They are at a point where they just can't really, distinguish right from wrong.
Right.
The caller feels scared or unsafe. This happens a lot because
Right.
when you see that individual acting out, we know that happens. And then also that there's a need for immediate action or intervention, substance abuse. They can't resolve the situation, or they're participating in unlawful behavior, and we've seen that happen from that.
Right.
So just a few things that you need to know when you're making that call. That next slide will tell you that when you make that call to 911, it's really important to look at the scene. So where you are, check out your house, your car. Your own safety is the most important. So is there a way to get out of there? Do not panic. That's the worst thing you can do.
Right.
Give your location, your address, your telephone number. It's
Right.
really important when you call the dispatcher to share all that. Give as much medical information as you can. It's extremely important if you know that individual has a psychiatric background that you need to share with them. They're on medication, they're bipolar, they're schizophrenic, they're acting out. This is what you can expect when you come to my house.
Right.
And here's the important thing. If the police arrive on the scene and they don't have that information, then that is going to trigger how they handle the situation. Give them everything you can.
Right.
So, and also listen to the dispatcher.
Yeah, let them guide you.
Yes.
Let them tell you what the process is going to be. And again, trying to not panic. It's
Right.
difficult in an emergent situation. Try not to panic, but some great information about how to, what term we use is de-escalate
Right.
that situation and let the police help.
Yes.
So that you can partner together. And it's just one of those things that we're just really glad to have had the history and the training that's needed to kind of work together with law enforcement about partnering.
About partnering and about sharing with them information that they can put what we call in a toolkit to
Yep.
have when they go out and they're responding to situations like that. So I think, in our first segment, we talked about how people can respond, what they need to share with them when they're calling. So let's talk a little bit about law enforcement response.
Okay.
And when they come out, what people can expect with that too. So that's that first slide we have. Police are trained to maintain control and ensure safety. That's their job, and we're very glad that they're on the streets doing that for us.
Absolutely.
And so when you make that call and you're worried about them overreacting, the best way to ensure a safe outcome is to stay calm. We talked about that first off. Don't panic.
Right.
When they arrive at your home, say, once again, let them know this is a mental health crisis. And mention that you can share any information, and then the biggest thing to do is step out of the way and let them handle the situation. Because if the more people that are involved, the bigger it becomes.
Right.
People really escalate when they have that many people involved. You
Sure.
know that. Yelling or getting too close to the officer is likely to make him or her feel out of control. We want them to be calm because
Right.
they're responding to a very serious situation.
Sure.
And you need to be aware that your loved one may be placed in handcuffs
Right.
and transported. So it's going to be extremely upsetting. So they need to be prepared for that. So a couple other things that you can expect from the police when you go out, and that's that next slide, is they're likely to ask about firearms. Are there any available around the house? Assess the level of danger present. Make the scene safe. Take control. Use the minimum amount of force necessary. And they also, like we said, may detain and handcuff the individual, arrest or take them to jail, take the individual to a medical facility if we need to. And sometimes they have to use lethal force if they're forced to.
Right.
And
If-
that's what we would like to try to avoid if we can get to that point.
Right, and just being aware that those are the steps that they have to take. That out
That's
of
their
respect
job.
that's exactly right, and they're simply doing their job, and they want to do it with the least amount of force possible. They want to do it with the least amount of conflict possible,
Exactly.
and sometimes outcomes are just not what we want or expect.
They're not. And, we have to be prepared for that when you make that phone call.
Right.
Let's talk about some of the things they also do. They can transport the person for you who wants to go to the hospital. They can take them also if they're involuntary evaluation, so they can transport for you, and they can go out and check on the welfare of an individual. So if you're calling and you're not in the same, dwelling with that person, but you know that they're having a situation, they're acting out, or that they've made threats, then they can go out and check on them as well. I wanted to share that because we utilize our sheriff's department, our police department so much to help us in all of our sites. And so sometimes they're bringing people in that we need to see. They've assessed the situation. They can tell us what what's going on to help us. Sometimes we call them into our clinic because we have someone that we need to have a physician's emergency certificate on. And so we need them to take them to a medical facility to help us out with that. And so they're very gracious about that. They know their role. They know what they're supposed to do because we've given them that information up front, which I think is huge.
Right. And that's the process that it takes place for somebody to go and be evaluated. When a physician says, I need help, we rely on law enforcement to get them where they need to be for further evaluation.
It's true. And so I also feel like, that we can't just expect our enforcement officials to go out and know what to do unless they've had training.
Right.
And so with our agency, and I know in other settings as well, we provide what's called crisis intervention training.
CIT.
And so it's a 40-hour class, so it's in a full week. And we give them information on how to deal with people in a mental health crisis, people that have been through addictions, people with developmental disabilities, how you should approach them, signs and symptoms to look for. We also have individuals that have come in and are what we call peer support specialists. So they've gone through treatment. They're on the other side. They're trying to help other people. They tell their story because I think it's important for them to be able to hear that and see that, to see that some people really do come out of this and can have, an excellent life and be able to, work in society, also with addictions as well, to understand that mindset because a lot of people don't understand. Why can't you just quit? Why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? Sometimes it's not quite that easy.
Right.
And that's always going to be a part of your life. And developmental disabilities, I know learning how to deal with some of those individuals because they can be very violent. Because they become out of control sometimes, autistic individuals. So learning how to work with them and talk to them. We do a lot of role playing. This is this type of situation. How would you handle it? How would you react? We have mental health professionals there that are guiding them through the whole process. We talk to them about medications. We talk about individuals who gamble. That's all part of addictions. And so just to be able to have that information in their toolkit as they're going out and responding to this is huge. And we'd love to be able to have enough people trained on shifts that if something like this came up, that's who you're going to send out to deal with that person.
Right. Yeah.
So,
and so just, and again, it's that true partnering of organizations just for the best outcomes. Because we know those people that have that CIT training, they're a little bit more understanding of maybe what that substance abuser may be going through, what that schizophrenic may be dealing with, what that person who is just not really in touch with reality is dealing with, and we want good outcomes.
We want good outcomes. I can tell you just really quickly with some stats. Since 2013, we've started doing crisis intervention classes. We trained 263 individuals, and we've also trained 143 dispatchers. So those individuals are out there, they have the knowledge and skills, and we want to put more of them in the community. That's the biggest thing we can do is educate everyone on what you need to do, who you need to call when, and then also what kind of information you need to share. I know we closed out that last segment talking about how many individuals have been trained, and I'm talking about law enforcement professionals in our Region 3 catchment area, so Assumption, Lafourche, St. Charles, St. James, St. John the Baptist, St. Mary, and Terrebonne. So we've had individuals from all of those parishes, police departments, sheriff's departments involved in those class trainings. And as I said, we have about 263 officers and 143 dispatchers. Dispatcher training is a one-day training, so it's a little faster and easier.
Right.
But I just want to point out, and we talked about this during the break, that some of these smaller departments, down the bodies and stuff, it's hard for them to send one person for a whole week because that takes someone from their force.
Right.
So we need to find ways that we can make that happen so that we can share that information.
Right. Being as creative as we need to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so, but there's certain things that we as individuals and family members can do to really identify what to do. And we've got a few bits of information about that we want to share as well. So go back to that slide.
Yeah, so what to do if you have a loved one that's having a mental breakdown. So, you know, as we're going through all the situations we've talked about with COVID and with the aftermath of the hurricane, it really does affect our psyche. And then we know as social workers that it can take anywhere from 6 months to 18 months for those symptoms to really start showing. So things to look at, if you've noticed that a loved one is acting a little differently, what can you do to help them before it gets to the point where you have to make that call?
Right.
So encourage them to stay connected with supportive family and friends. That's huge. To be able to have that connection, get into that daily routine and keep that. Encourage them to stay in a regular daily routine. Support them in continuing any treatment that they are already on until they can get to their healthcare provider. So make sure you're taking your medication. If you can get on the group calls, do Zoom, whatever, make sure that that's happening. And then if it becomes really bad, encourage them to call a mental health professional to get help so that they can talk with somebody. That's the biggest thing that you can do, because sometimes as the person that's involved, you're too close to the situation.
Yeah, and we think we're doing a really good job of helping on our own, but we need that professional source that's not in the home or inside of that.
Exactly.
So who do they call?
Who do
How
they
do they
call?
get help?
So there are other numbers that you can call before 911 if your person is not in an emergency or crisis. So we do have our call line there up there first. We're local, 877-500-9997, and we have trained individuals, masters and licensed social workers and clinical counselors that can speak to them. We have peer support specialists. You just want to talk?
Right.
We can do that too, and we can help you through that situation. But we also have providers on there if we need to change medication or talk to you about that. National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Love this number, 800-273-8255. They're available. They also have multiple language. So
Right.
I want to talk about that because we have individuals who are Hispanic and also other forms here in our area. So
Other cultures.
we've got to be able to speak to them in a
Right.
language they understand.
Yeah.
I love this one, this line too. I've called it to see what it does. I mean, texted it. So in a crisis,
Okay.
you need to talk. So this may be for our younger generation because they don't really want to talk, but they'll text to
They'll
you
text
all
you.
day long.
Yes, they will.
So text home to 741-741 to connect with a crisis counselor. It's free 24/7 support
Wow.
at your fingertips. So there's multiple ways. I've just given these three, but there's multiple ways for you to be able to get connected to someone that can help you and someone that can talk.
Right. And fortunately, we have all of our South Central Louisiana Human Service Authority locations that are available.
Right.
And so they can call there, and they often link you up. The call line can link you.
Yes, to
That's why it's
911.
there.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
As needed. And so
Right.
y'all are available. Y'all handle emergency situations during the day. A 911 is for emergency situations after hours, but the call line is available.
Yep, and our staff, it's been our really single point of entry since the storm. And so those services have really amped up. And we've been, very fortunate to be able to provide a lot of information. And so that next slide, if you will, Jason, that shows also our resource app.
Right.
So you can just hover over this thing when you get onto our website or Facebook page and download it, and it has multiple resources for everything you can imagine for all 7 of our parishes. So if you're looking for something, get on there. If you can't find it, call us. We'll be able to help you too.
Right.
But multiple resources for
Right.
everything you can imagine.
So for the generation that enjoys calling, give a
Yes.
call.
Yeah.
For the generation that really needs to be face to face,
Yes.
come on in.
Right.
And for the generation that really wants to use the app, I love that these are all available.
Right.
Because there are people. I mean, I know people that don't even do menus anymore because everything is an app.
That's right.
That they can check everything out on their phone, and everybody's so connected. This is a great opportunity that shows lots of resources and availability for all of your 7 parishes. So it's
I
wonderful.
appreciate that.
In
Yeah.
our last
so
30 seconds. Go ahead.
They can also go to SCLHSA.org. It's our website, or to our Facebook page. We put all kinds of information on there every day. Did you know about certain things? All kinds of things. And then lastly, you see all of our sites there. We are open. We are seeing everyone. They can come in. They can do virtual, whatever they need to do. And once again, our call line, I want to just put that out there again, 877-500-9997.
Well, Lisa, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to really come and spend some time with us today, but all of the hours that you and your team spend educating us and law enforcement about what to do. We appreciate it.
I really appreciate that. Thank you for having us.
All right. Again, Lisa Schilling, Executive Director, South Central Louisiana Human Services Authority. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for being with us. Don't go anywhere. A whole lot more Bayou time when we continue.